Fort Canning, completed in 1861, was initially built as a military stronghold for the British colony in Southeast Asia. Previously known as Bukit Larangan, or the Forbidden Hill, natives believed that it was where the spirits of their ancestral kings resided. In 1859, the British began construction of Fort Canning in light of rising security threats. Armed with 7 68-pounder cannons, 8 8-inch guns, 2 30-inch mortars, and 2 14-pounder carronades. Yet the fort's military advantage was doomed from the very beginning.
There were several strategic considerations in the planning of Fort Canning. The design of Fort Canning's defense was such that all the primary cannons were facing south to protect the Straits of Malacca from naval threats. However, located half a mile away from the nearest coastline, its cannons were virtually too far away to reach out to naval attacks. In addition, the invasion of the Japanese forces from the Straits of Johor coming from the northwest left Singapore unprepared, as they anticipated that an assault would come from the south. During the Japanese invasion, the cannons were turned north to attack the invaders. However, they were armed with ordnance that was not effective against the ground infantry of Japan. It did not hinder the Japanese advancement.
Fort Canning is located on top of a hill, providing the soldiers with a wider field of view. This serves as a vantage point where they were able to detect enemies coming from the harbour and devise counterattacks effectively. Also, the elevation of Fort Canning meant that the enemy infantry would exhaust their energy in progressing up the hill. Sally ports built into the fort allowed defending troops to perform sneak attacks at the back of advancing enemies. These tactics were advantageous as the surprise might confuse the enemy ranks. However, Fort Canning was never attacked by ground troops during the invasion of Singapore, and sally ports were never used.
The battle box was built as a military headquarters. It was an impressive bunker with 1 meter thick walls that could withstand bombings, gas attacks, and power failures. Although occupied during operations, General Percival stated that the battle box was too small for its intended use. The Japanese took over Fort Canning right after the inevitable surrender of the British. A military base was set up by the Japanese during the occupation. When the Japanese took over, they made use of the established communication systems left behind by the British. The battle box thus became the headquarters for wartime communications in Singapore.
Fort Canning fell quickly to the Japanese shortly after they invaded Singapore. As we look deeper into Fort Canning's history, it becomes clear that Singapore could not rely on others for her defense. National service was introduced shortly after the independence of Singapore to remind and enforce on the point that defense is dependent on every citizen of Singapore.
Now, looking back at the reasons, it becomes clear that Fort Canning was never meant to succeed in the first place. Poor planning of the defences and sheer arrogance of the British military at that time accelerated the inevitable fall of Singapore. I'm Poh Ling, and thank you for watching.